So welcome everyone to the Conservation Careers podcast. This is the second episode in the kind of new pilot format that we're having, where we have two special guest hosts joining me here in the podcast, and we're going to talk more deeply about a topic that's of interest to all of us and hopefully to you guys at home. So today we're going to talk about applying for conservation jobs, something that everyone has to do. It's a hurdle we have to jump if you want to kind of secure work in the sector, and something that I think probably all three of us see a lot of all the time, and something that I think a lot of people kind of struggle with. It's certainly not a pleasure or a joy applying for conservation jobs, but it's something that we have to do, and we see the same mistakes kind of again and again, and the same struggles as well. So in this topic today, we're going to talk about our own experiences of kind of applying for jobs, the highs and lows, and then just share some tips about, how do you find jobs online and how do you apply for them successfully. And joining me again, like in the first pilot of the podcast, is Stephanie Schuttler, Dr. Stephanie Schuttler, fancy scientist, and also co-host as well, Fernando Mateos-González from Bioblogía. Welcome, guys. Team
Hello
assemble.
There. Yay!
It's like X-Men or something, doesn't it? Like they all come together, like careers advisors.
We should do the hero pose when we jump.
Yeah, that's it.
And
just
land with the fist on the ground.
So I was saying just before we got chatting, really, or recording, maybe we should start by just sharing our own experiences of applying for jobs, because we've, obviously we're sort of mid-career. I think the three of us are kind of roughly around the same sort of level. So we've been applying for jobs now for 10, 20 years, on and off. Yeah. What I'm going to hand over to you guys to start with. Have you talked about what recent job have you, Nando, you secured a job most recently that I'm aware of. Like, what happened there?
It was in December. Mm-hmm. It's so I'm working remotely for a research center in Lithuania, and I analyze data for them, and then I do all the things I used to do as a postdoc. I do now part-time, because I combine this new job with my job here as a conservationist. And the story of that job is we were going through some funding insecurity in our NGO. We were in between applications for new funding, and we weren't sure if we could cover all our expenses for the year until we get to the next round of applications. So I was looking for alternative ways or new applications, new sources of funding. And then I thought, maybe I can apply for a part-time job and then liberate the NGO from part of my salary. And then it came out of the blue. It came through Twitter. I saw a message asking for someone with a certain skill set to be able to analyze a data set. And it was mentioning certain abilities I had just been honing this last pandemic year, because I couldn't go to the field. So I will learn something. So I started doing courses online on R, statistics. And then I learned to do all these nifty tricks that could impress people. So I wrote a very short email. And then I said, I want to see if we are a good fit before doing an official application. So here is what I think is good I will be good for your job. And then I just replied with one line to every one of the requirements. And I wrote, I can do this, and here's the proof. I can do this, and you can see here how I did it. I can do this. And then I just replied to that, and I said, if you think we are a good fit, we could talk online and see if we can manage part-time, and I will be super happy. And then directly, there was no filtering. I didn't need to send the CV or anything. I just went to the interview phase with that little email that made everything so clear and to the point. Yes, I can be useful for you.
Was that a strategy? Were you sort of trying to get in their face early?
It was both a strategy and a necessity, because I didn't have time to redo the CV. And then I thought I can gain more time if I do it like this, and it was fantastic. Finally, I had to send a CV afterwards for the actual contract and everything, and then I had more time to put it up to date. But preparing the CD is my worst stage. I hate it, but I try to avoid it and push it as far as possible, and it worked for this specific case. So I was very happy, and I'm very happy now. This is the conference I was telling you about. I'm going to Baltimore in November, so I'm very happy with the new job.
I've not sort of heard of that before actually as well. Like we encourage people on our side, like, get in touch if you're not sure about something, make contact, because you kind of, I guess you stand out from the crowd a little bit as well, as long as you're asking like a good question, not a silly question. But just sort of pitching yourself to say, do you think I'm a good fit? And by the way, here's all the good stuff. What do you reckon? That's quite canny.
It's a shortcut, but it's only for very, as you say, very specific cases where you actually need to know, okay, does this fit? Like, is this part-time what you mean? Or how can we arrange this? And then, I mean, it will, of course, not always work, but for this case, it was perfect. I made it easy for that person, and that person made it easy for me. Also, now don't need to send. I have enough with what you prove already.
Amazing. I think that's a great strategy because job applications, especially the higher you go up in your career, they're a lot of work. And like once you get your PhD, you might have to submit like proposals, like do a mock proposal for something, or certainly for professor jobs, you have to have a whole like research statement, which is at least two pages, single space, and a teaching statement, teaching philosophy. So for you to like reach out and be like, does this sound like a good fit just initially? I think that's such a great strategy, even for somebody to use when they're just starting out their career, if they're not sure if they're competitive for that job. And that's one of my tips is to apply for jobs that you're most competitive for. And there are some jobs where you might not know that. So I think that's great that you did that.
Yeah, totally. Wait, when you're like looking at jobs, like, and you sort of see there's all these criteria, essential and desirable and all that sort of stuff. As Stephanie saying, find the jobs that you're most suited for. That obviously puts you in a kind of, a strong position. How much of the kind of the essential and desirable criteria do you think people need to have in order to apply? Because I think that's something that we all wrestle with.
Yeah, I think it's difficult, and it varies according to what stage of your career you're at. I think when you're newer, you can get by maybe meeting like 70% of the requirements, and usually requirements are more vague. And I also think it depends on the job application too. If the job application has very, very specific requirements, it is clear that they're looking for somebody with that experience. And when it gets to be that much, honestly, I say like 90% and above, because when I first started applying for jobs, there was really no help for this type of career. It was, the internet was young and all of the job websites were what? I know I'm not that old, but still the internet has changed dramatically. Although there is still a big gap with helping out with this field. There's not as much compared to other careers. But, I would go to monster.com and it was all like designed for people working in offices and businesses. And I had to take their examples and like figure out how to apply it to science. But one of the things I read was like, if you meet, and I've heard this over and over again, like if you meet like at least 60% of the job requirements, you should apply, because it's a wish list. And especially for women, we tend to undersell ourselves. So I started doing that when I got my PhD, I started doing that. And I found that I was not competitive for those jobs. The jobs that I got interviews for, I met honestly nearly all the requirements, like 90% and above.
Yeah, because now the market is so big for candidates that they are so likely to find the perfect candidate.
Right.
There is more competition for sure in this connected world.
Yeah. I wonder if like employers are looking for more and more as a result. I mean, some of the jobs you see advertised have like, 15, 20 criteria, and you think really, they either have someone in mind already that kind of ticks all these boxes, or they're really kind of stretching, and there has to be some compromise within that from their side, that it's unlikely the perfect candidate is going to drop in with everything they need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But honestly, though, in my experience, I would apply for jobs and be like, oh my God, I am the perfect candidate for this. Who else are they going to find? And I'm like the bridesmaid of jobs, where I'm like the maid of honor every time and not the bride. And they always found somebody with like that much more experience, either in like fundraising or in grant writing or just years in science, more science communication skills. One was about increasing diversity. So the candidate that got it spoke Spanish fluently. So it totally makes sense that they hired that person. But yeah, I think like what Nando's saying, there's just so many qualified people out there now that they can afford to be very selective.
The good news for everyone is that it works two ways, because now there are jobs that we wouldn't hear about in other times, but now we are the perfect fit for that job. So it works both ways, particularly when you get a bit more of experience, then you end up having your perfect niche. And then anything.
But I think if the job advertisements are a little bit more vague, then you can be more vague, I guess, with meeting those requirements. Like when I think about our museum internships, I don't think we had we didn't say like we needs camera trap experience or anything like that. It was more about their abilities to be trained to do that. But again, if you're applying for like a bird tech position and they say like you must have banding experience and I don't know what else specifically, occupancy modeling experience and all these things, then I wouldn't apply for it, because they're looking for somebody who can like go into the lab and do occupancy modeling.
Yeah. That's fair. I was talking to my wife at lunchtime, actually. She works in conservation, and we're doing a run together and talking about the podcast. Like I said, we're going to talk about, applying for jobs, and have you got any advice? Because she does a lot of shortlisting and recruitment, and she touched on the same thing as well. Like there's a difference between sort of general competencies and criteria and technical. General, most people, if you can write an application, you can kind of cover that stuff. Can you work in a team? Can you work to deadlines? Can you manage a project? Sort of stuff that is across a lot of transferable jobs, transferable skills, if you like. And you should be able to craft good statements, whoever you are around that. That's just a skill. You need to learn it. And there's good examples online, and draw from your own experience to kind of showcase to employees you can do that. But it's very hard to do that for a technical thing, like bird banding or occupancy or whatever. You either have done it or you haven't done it. If you haven't done it, it's a gap you need to fill, and you need to find a way of filling it, or talking to an employer about how you would fill it if you were offered the job.
Right. Yeah. And what I do in my applications, if I'm missing a skill, I say something like, I'm excited to learn this new skill, and based on XYZ, I'm confident I can learn it. But I only do it if I'm missing like one thing out of the whole application, not like 2, 3, or 4 more. And Nando, I loved the way you said in that email, like here's what so the job advertisement had like a bullet, and you're like, well, I have that experience, and you said, here's how I did it, or here's where I did it, here's exactly what I did. And that's like great advice for cover letters, because I see so many students write like they just think they're listing their experiences, and even rewriting them on a cover letter showcases that. And you can't just say like, I work great as a team. You have to say as exemplified by, and give examples of when you worked well as a team, things like that.
Yeah.
I just thought of another tip I often give. If you find a long list of technical skills and you don't recognize many of them, if you see one that is like a commercial program, like, I don't know, do you know this? We require someone that has experience with sonic whatever. For example, some program to analyze the sound of the dolphins or things like that. Have a look during a weekend at that program. Usually they are open source and free, the programs that companies or NGOs use. And have a look during a weekend and try to play with a toy example during that weekend. And I assure you that you can write, after a weekend of playing with it, you can write, I am familiar with the program. And then you can even publish what you did in this weekend and say, I have been trying to learn this program, and this is what I did. I took this example from here and this data from here, and I tried to apply to this specific case. And then you tweak the case so that it looks like what the company is looking for. Like if they are analyzing data from a certain region, you try and tweak the example you find online or in Stack Overflow or in GitHub. You try to use that example and create your own toy example that looks exactly like that, what they are looking for. And then you just say, in all honesty, hi, I just started with this program and this is what I have done. And then you already demonstrate that even if you are not an expert, you can learn very fast and you can provide already results. And in a weekend, you get ahead of all the other candidates or many of them.
And it's hyper specific to that organization too. And I guess if you get an interview off the back of that, which might be in like, say, 2 weeks' time, you've got 2 more weeks to progress your learning in that area. You might want to kind of fill the gap around.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a really positive thing. The last job I applied for, well, quite some time ago, like they asked for to speak French, and I don't speak. I just speak English, right? So it was a kind of case of like,
that's a tough one.
It's a
Did
tough
they ask
one.
you? I have a similar experience. Did they ask you to speak French? Did they speak a French question to you in the interview?
No, thankfully. So, but in my application, what I did was I got to address it, right? It says, I think it was it essential? I think it might have been. No, it was desirable French, fluency or whatever. And I found that round the corner from where I was going to be based was a French language school, and they did lessons on like a Monday night at 7 o'clock. And so I said in my application, I speak basic level French, which is true. I can order a beer on holiday and that sort of stuff. But, were to be employed, I would sign up to the Alliance Française on this street. On a Monday night, I would take their evening classes, over a few months, and that's going to get me up to the level I want. And I kind of said, look, there's a problem. Here's my solution to it. And really, it's down to you now as to, do you think that Nick could learn a language or not through this process? And if the answer is yes, then that problem's removed. So I guess a bit like I tried to make it like really specific. I've identified the solution, a real specific, solution to this problem.
That's it.
Yeah, and I think you can do that around a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And nowadays it's so cool because there's so many opportunities available. Like, even just like occupancy modeling. If you don't know occupancy modeling, my friend, Mike Cove, he has a YouTube channel, like literally with webinars on occupancy modeling intro. And like you said, you can find R is really common in our field, the program R. You can find free R data sets and play with it. There's the program Swirl that can get you started learning R automatically. Like it's like it talks to you actually when you input really things. Nice. It's really cool. And then also I always say community science or citizen science, like say you want that bird banding experience. Maybe you can't get that right away, but you can definitely participate in programs like eBird and do that regularly and at least show your commitment to learning and doing things on your own.
Yeah.
And even if you don't have time for this job in particular, you can try to do it for next year. And usually jobs come up or internships. And then you can say, okay, now I have the objective. I can get enough experience till then.
Yeah. So you mentioned something earlier, Nando. You said you found the job on Twitter, the one that you applied for recently. Like, where should people go job hunting? Twitter's a good place, right? How do you use Twitter to find jobs, and where else should we be looking as well?
I think before that, of course, this is what we always say in the course and everywhere. Like the best tip is to first decide what you wanna work for and what's the really specific job you wanna have. And then once you have that, it's very easy to look everywhere, because in Twitter, if you have been researching and you have been trying to find people that have this job, you already know them, you already follow them. On LinkedIn, you will be already connected. You will know exactly what you want if you have been working on it. And then it's just a matter of reading a bit every day. You can set up alerts in every platform for keywords, and then they will come to you. And something that happens also when after some research and showing that you are interested in this is that people send you those offers. And that happens all the time now, because I have like a profile in the mind of people like, this is what Nando does. And then everybody is sending things all the time, which is not so good, because then I get distracted and I want to apply to all the jobs and
new shiny things.
Things.
I think if you're looking for graduate experience, it's really it's not easy, but it's a really great way to find experiences is through Twitter. I see professors tweet their positions a lot, and they seem to get a lot of retweets. And I encourage, even if people are not interested in science communication at all, scientists should be on Twitter because it's so great for networking.
Yeah. And LinkedIn nowadays, you mentioned LinkedIn too. Like, yeah, it's becoming the recruitment platform, isn't it? To have your profile, to become known for a thing, but also just for kind of connecting to employers, finding jobs. It's a great place. Yeah.
Also, related to this, something I get asked a lot is, what if I don't like social media? What if I don't want? I hate it. I recommend even to these people to create even a skeleton profile to keep in the loop, and also to be fundable, like for people to find you, because you don't need to do all the quote bad stuff of social media. You don't even need to look at the wall and all the toxic stuff, but you can use it to your own benefit by being there.
As an employer, you probably jump straight on. Actually, if you're really interested in, if this was an interview, the three of us would be interviewed for a job. I'd make sure I'd looked at the profiles of all three of us and see, what are you about? What are you sharing? What's your history? It's all on there, isn't it? You need something. It probably looks a bit strange if there's nothing about you on there.
Exactly. That's what. Who do you want to control your social media presence and your internet presence? Do you want to control it yourself, or let some algorithm create an image of you based on what you did when you were a teenager?
Yeah. It's interesting. I use LinkedIn, but on a light level. So I set my profile up, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, something like that. And as I did it sort of said, do you want to reach out to your contacts, and import your address book from Google, I think it was. And I just went, yeah, and it sort of hoovered them in, and then presumably sent contacts out to everyone that I knew from my email account. Yeah, well, it just did it, didn't it? Right. And then there was, X amount of people that were suddenly my contacts on there. And I put maybe my light profile on it at the time. And I've only updated it, as new kind of employment things have come along. But it's grown organically. And to be honest, if anyone has to connect, they get a yes. It is that simple. There's no filtering on my side.
Do you accept everyone?
I accept everyone. Yeah, I do. I really do.
I do. I accept, if people are in my field, I usually accept them. But if they're outside, I definitely reject them. But LinkedIn, actually, for the longest time, I was like, how do scientists use LinkedIn? Because it's so business oriented. But another great way that I've found to use LinkedIn is that you can see who other people are connected to, and it actually tells you. So if I were to click, say I wanted to work with a scientist and I clicked on their profile, it'll say you have 2 mutual contacts. And then when you're applying for the job, you can refer to that mutual conflict. Contact. And sorry, there's a fly on my screen. I was distracted.
I saw it too. Yeah.
We were all distracted.
So you can do that and refer to that. And then they're like, oh, this person's know so-and-so. So I can call them up and see how they are to work with. And it's just an in. It's something that you both have mutually in common.
And I think that's probably an argument for the more the merrier. That's the game I play, in the sense that the more contacts I have, that as and when I might benefit from that contact, that they're there, the more kind of secondary contacts, the person in common. It's definitely helped a few times, actually. I'm interested in an organization. Well, this person knows all those people, and I barely know this person, but it's still enough of a contact to get an introduction. So maybe.
With LinkedIn, I think that it's a good strategy to say yes to everyone, but to nurture an inner circle of people you have really contact with. Right. You accept everyone just to feed the algorithm and to please the robot. If you say yes to everyone, you appear higher in all the searches. If you have more followers, more connections, you appear higher when a company is looking for a profile like yours. So then that's a good strategy, even though LinkedIn wouldn't like what I'm saying. But then, it's very important not to have an empty network. So you have to do something with the people you care about and those that are interesting to you.
Yeah, and I think the power of LinkedIn nowadays, I think we're only still scratching the surface of it, really. One interesting thing, I think, from a job seeker's perspective of, if you're interested in applying for a job, or maybe you didn't get a job, maybe you applied for it, and you were the bridesmaid and not the bride, you can look to see, well, who got it, give it a few weeks or a month and see who gets that job, and then look at their background and their history and see, well, what is their experience and skills, and were they better than me, or did they have certain things, and was it 80% or 90%, like how close a fit were they?
Yes.
And you can do that for any job, and I'm almost interested in doing that for like going back through jobs, like looking at really popular jobs on our site today and seeing, well, actually what who got it and what do they actually have, because it matches up against there's the employers and what they're looking for, and actually reality and the people who walk through the door. And it'd be really interesting to see, well, what was the percentage match, because it's all there on LinkedIn, right, or mostly.
And you can also ask for feedback from your interview too. I forget how to word this correctly, but I've done that for jobs. Like one job I didn't get an interview for, and I really wanted it, and I asked why, and basically they said they were looking for someone with more specific experience in I think spatial ecology. That was what the job advertised, and just more experience in general. But yeah, you can ask them. And another job, I didn't have fundraising experience, so it'll help you figure out, like you said, what you need to work on.
Yeah, it's really valuable. And so many employers nowadays say, we don't share feedback. We had too many applications. We can't give one-to-one feedback. But one thing I saw recently was an employer that shared, and we copied it ourselves actually, because we were looking for some social media volunteers on our site, and we used the same thing, which was we shared like what the people who got the job did well, like just not about why you didn't get the job, it's about why the person who did get the job, like what were they doing particularly well, and share that feedback. And that was really valuable to other people. I think that it's a simple thing that any employer can do. Yeah, because it must be really disheartening to spend, job hunting is a job in itself. It takes a huge amount of time to do applications well. You can't just kind of fire out the same old CV in the same application form. It really needs that kind of bespoke element to it, really carefully. And to send something and not hear anything back at all, I think it's quite disheartening. You need something to kind of keep building from. So I definitely like an appeal to employers out there. It just gives something back to those people who spend time, and interest in your company, your organization. Yeah, that's it would help a lot, right?
Yeah. Even though you say that it takes a long time, and we are talking about how hard it is, I hear you both talking about the process and how you go afterwards and look at trends and who got the job. And I think there is a character of I don't know, we get addicted to this feeling when you send an application, when you finally send the application, it's exciting. And even if you don't get it, like the whole process is exciting. And then you can get this addiction, almost addiction to.
You get addicted to applying for jobs.
Yeah, this strategy part is very engaging, or meeting someone. And then also, very important, using the whole process as a system and not thinking only of the goal. The advantage of using a system is that you gain things along the way, even if you don't get to the goal. And in this case, the system will get you contacts possibly. Like you can get to the interview stage and maybe not get the job, but then you make sure to keep in touch with all these people and learn from them. And even if I didn't get the job, I'm very interested in how you got it and how you got to be where you are. And I really enjoyed your interview questions. And what would you recommend, or how did the person that got the job reply to this specific question that was very difficult for me?
Yeah.
Or they might also place you elsewhere. That happens sometimes too. Or they sometimes they have something else coming up you don't know, and they encourage you to apply. When I applied to my second internship, it was for a program, but I didn't get the number one choice. And then they put me in another one and asked if that was okay, and ended up being really great. But I agree. I think when you're starting out, like I always talk about, like what you guys were saying, that you need to niche down and like figure out what you want to do in the end. And that can be really hard starting out. And I think starting out, like you really just have to try to get that first experience. And I think if you're in college still, a great way to do that is volunteering in a lab. And even if it's not related that much to what you want to do, because I figured out I wanted to do this close to my senior year, actually. And my school didn't offer much in terms of wildlife at all. And there was like 2 ecology labs. So the one lab I joined was studying flower beetles, which are, it's because it's wildlife, but it's a model species. And, we were working in a lab, but that lab experience led me to the job in Disney World I was talking about, where I got to, which it sounds like it was a fun job, but we were in a lab and we studied the hormones of animals.
You weren't dressed up as Mickey, no?
No, I wasn't. We did have to interact with guests. And I mean, I love Disney anyway, but we did have to interact with guests. But we mostly talked about the research that we were doing. But yeah, I was doing PCRs in the first job and running gels. So they knew that I could do these enzyme immunoassays. So you can transfer those skills, even though your first one's not perfect to fit for you.
Yeah. And I guess one question it's worth us kind of discussing around is, if you wanted to present that information to an employer on an application form, that your PCR analysis or whatever, like how should people write stuff down in a form on their CVs? How do they talk about their experiences? Because what I see a lot is people, and I sort of call it like empty worders, like, let's say you want to, they want someone who can work in a team, a good team member, a good team player, however it's phrased, and it's very easy to write, I work really well in teams, people from all sorts of different backgrounds and cultures, I always fit in, I'm comfortable, blah, 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 blah. And it's just really generic stuff, and in that sort of example.
I see on resumes, I see students list data analysis.
What does that mean?
I know exactly. Like, what does that mean? Like, you could be like a superstar statistician, or you could have made one graph.
Exactly. Yeah. And Christy, who, works at Conservation Careers, she said recently, and I loved it as well. She said, if someone else can write what you've just written, it's too general.
That one is so good.
Yeah.
And so I think students are really bad at honestly like bragging about themselves and like picking out these like unique features of their experiences. And like I did a resume workshop recently, and I had some students where I gave them one-on-one advice, and like they had all this amazing experience, but they weren't showcasing it on their resume. They were kind of like hiding it. Like even they'll write something like camera trapping, and it's like, well, did you set up, like 3 camera traps, or did you like run grids of camera traps and process all the photos and manage the data? Like you have to so adding details is what I tell them. Like if you do something once, you don't want to necessarily make it seem like you're not that experienced. You actually want to try to do the opposite without lying. But if you like really have experience in something, you should be as detailed as possible to show that you work with teams. If you're managing people ever, even if it's like, just someone just under you, that's a really big deal. And adding numbers, even things like time in the field too. Like a lot of times they'll say like, long days in the field. You could say, I worked 12-hour days in this position. And even though it got difficult, I still loved checking for salamanders or whatever you're doing. So you can use some of that language and specific examples.
Yeah, because it allows an employer just to gauge, well, how much have you done of this thing and how good are you at this thing? Like the data analysis is perfect. Like it can mean so much. Yeah, but facts, figures, stats. A framework I quite like. Sorry, Nando, go on.
Yeah, I was just thinking that knowing exactly what the employer wants, then you can create a shape that will fit in that box, like in the toy games. So then you decide how many or how do you write those numbers and figures so that they fit the box the employer has in his head to do it like that. It's like I do things that are a bit strange. Like, for example, in one of my an application some time ago, I even add as a proof of the experience the nickname other employer gave me for a specific reason that was fitting.
Right. Well, I want to ask, what was the nickname?
Yeah, what was the nickname?
It was Face, like in the A team, because I was able to find resources all the time and go and convince people.
Was Face the guy who drove the car, the smooth one? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's good. It shows your personality too, without being like too silly. Like that's a really good
borderline
example.
in that case.
Yeah.
About
I think that's okay. I think that one's okay because you tied it to a legitimate reason.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, so much of it, I think, particularly when you get to interview stage, is it's about personalities. It's about two people or three people connecting and wanting to work to each other. You know, an application form says you should be able to do the job or not. Let's bring the people in who look like they can do this job. And in an interview, beyond just trying to get a few more details out where you're not quite sure about everything, it's about sort of saying, are they going to fit in here? Are we going to get on? Are we going to work nicely together? Is this the right person? Is the rapport, good? And that's a big part of it. So just showing you're a human being, that's great.
You are building the rapport even before the interview stage. And also one thing that this does is a bit risky, but if you do it well, what you create is a nickname for the application. So that when people send your CV, your application around, yeah, this is the guy, the face guy. This is and then the office talks about you, and then that creates a link, and then you are there in the top. If you do it well, of course. If you don't overdo it.
You need to wear the white suit and the red tie.
What is your opinion on adding like colors and photos to resumes?
I think they need to look nice. That would be my opinion. They need to look well formatted, well designed, but clean and simple and clear. You're just trying to present information as best you can. So if you're a good designer and you've got a good eye for detail and you can produce something that looks beautiful, do it. But if you don't have those skills, then don't try and overproduce something because they can look awful. Yeah.
And very specific cases like, for example, I saw again on Twitter a very nice application, and it had a strategy behind. It was a girl that wanted to work. I don't know if she wanted to work in Spotify, and what she did was to create the CV with the same Spotify feeling, the same design, putting some funny things like click here to go forward or things like that.
That's cool.
But then behind that, she created, like, I think that the job was also had some social media or engagement part. So what she did was she created a lot of hype around the CV application, because everybody can go to Canva and create something that looks like a Spotify. But what she did was to prove that she can engage people, and she went one by one through all the platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. And then she wrote a different post adapted to that platform. And at the same time that she was creating this virality with her work, with her CV, she was proving that she was engaging the people. So I think it worked perfectly. Everybody was pushing it and sending it directly to the important people that will make the decision. It was a fantastic hack.
I love that.
So what if somebody had in our field, like they had a CV with an outline of a fox or something, like if they're going to study foxes? Because my thought on, I think that's a really cool example, and I think that that's right for the company, but my experience is like scientists can be just like very serious. And so my opinion on colors and design and stuff is not to do it, because you're more likely to do something wrong, and it is not likely going to help you. But I did post that on a Facebook group once because somebody was asking about this. So I wrote my opinion, and somebody wrote that they got, they think that the color helped them get a job. Their employer told them that it stood out in a sea of like black and white, like how you were saying. So maybe it varies according to company and culture, but with science jobs, I always tell them to play it safe.
As you say, it's better to play it safe unless you know the aim and the person that is gonna read it. And if you know that he or she are gonna like it, then you can go for it. But if not, I will also play it safe and just go for, this is what you need and I can give it to you. Colors don't matter.
One thing we've encouraged other people to do that I quite like in certain contexts is like to include the logos of your employers that you've had. Now, if those logos are relevant, if you've been working in conservation, it's like WWF and whoever, people that other employers would recognized, then actually in your CV in the chronological order, just having those little logos, it looks really nice. It visually looks nice, and it shows that you've been working for these organizations. It looks kind of impressive. Those kind of little visual identities are kind of quite cool.
Yeah, they'll help.
Yeah, but definitely keep it simple. Yeah, keep it simple.
I think a good way to think about it is to think of your CV as an advertisement, and then who is your audience? If you think of, you can even read marketing books on how the companies do advertisement and what works and what doesn't. So what you, Nick, just mentioned is a perfect hook that we talk about. The hook.
Yeah.
It's a link that you create. Okay, this person is attaching their image to a different brand that has already a nice sound to it, a nice look to it. So if you attach your profile to a brand that is respected, you are gaining that brand's respect. Now that's a good way to think about your CV as an advertisement.
Yeah, and that could be volunteer internships, other experiences too. Yeah, it helps to kind of showcase that connection. Yeah. One thing we've not discussed in detail, but I wanted to kind of touch on is the sort of the structuring of answers. And we talked about facts and figures and things like that being really useful. A framework I really like is, and you might have heard of it, it's like STAR, STAR, which stands for situation, task, action, response. So if you're telling someone I did this thing, it's a kind of useful framework of things to kind of bear in mind. So like talk about the situation. So example for me would be the situation was I was doing my PhD at university and I was studying barn owls, within this area and helping to conserve them. So the task I defined was to define the survey area and to contact local landowners and to understand, how many birds are there. The activities I went out during the breeding season, collected data, collected surveys, and so on. And the result was we found there was, 80 breeding pairs in the area or something like that. And it kind of shows the whole start to finish. It's a bit like telling a story. It's like the beginning, middle, and end. The beginning was I needed to do this thing. B, I did in the middle, I did this thing. And the result was this thing happened. And this is the outcome of it. And the bit I see missing a lot actually in applications is the kind of the outcome, the response. And I always encourage people to go a bit further with it. So if you found 80 pairs of barn owls or whatever, ask yourself kind of, so what, why is that important? Well, that represents 2% of the population of the UK, and it's the highest density period, in whatever. So what, why is that important? Well, this is an internationally recognized bird. We're helping to conserve it. You can kind of keep going and it sort of hits these international targets or whatever, you can kind of go bigger and bigger and bigger with the outcomes. And it's the outcomes that people really remember when it comes to kind of applications. And it's the bit, don't just say what you did, say what happened as a result. That's probably the simplest. That would have saved me about 5 minutes of talking. That.
But I like how you say the so what. So what? If you keep on adding so what, it gets to the perfect framing, the perfect result.
And also, this is actually a big piece of advice I give that's along those lines is I think I see the job application as about the company. Like, yes, it's about you, but it's about their job and like why you are a good fit. So like in that example, part of the so what would be like your research question, but also that you could do something similar in that job if that was a job requirement for that, or if that was a requirement for that position. So thinking about the company, doing research on the company, I include companies' mission statements in some of my cover letters. Like for my museum application, I literally quoted their mission statement or part of it and said, these are values that I align with. And then later in my cover letter, giving examples of how you demonstrated those values and yeah, so like really do your research on the same thing with Disney World. When I applied to Disney World, I knew Disney, yes, it's a research lab, but they care about Disney. And I knew in that case, I could talk about like my love for Disney and
nice.
It does. Sometimes you do have to worry about it borderline like cheesy. Like you don't want to be like, I grew up like, always wanting to work at Disney World or something like that. But I would talk about how I admired Disney because in most of their movies, they had like ecologically appropriate or scientifically accurate assemblages of animals. Like if you look at the Jungle Book, like they get the animals right. They're not mixing like toucans with elephants and stuff like that. So I wrote about that. I wrote about more scientific thing, but showing that I was a fan of the company. And when I had my interview, they actually do ask you, what's your favorite Disney movie and why?
Of course. You should expect
Which is?
The Little Mermaid. And the reason is actually pretty shallow. I think I made it sound better.
Shallow.
I don't know. I just think it's such a beautiful movie. And I think maybe I did say something like this, but it's such a beautiful movie. And I just love all like the choral scenes, and it really makes you feel like you're part of a different world, and you get to see things that you normally don't get to see from the surface. It gives you appreciation for the ocean.
Nice. Yeah.
Very
I mean, showing passion, is something that you kind of got to get the balance right, but you need to do it, and particularly in an interview, it's very easy, I think, when you're nervous to kind of stop the passion and you become quite stilted and, it's not coming out, and people want to see that. So, but not being too cheesy, it's something you have to kind of personally strike, isn't it? And doing your research. Yeah, it's great. There's a Save the Rhino. It's an organization based here out of the UK, obviously saving rhinos in Africa. And they have a really popular internship called the Michael Hearn Internship, which is a paid 1-year communications and fundraising internship. And they get a lot of applications for it because it's paid. And each year they publish the results of their application process as kind of like an open thing, and say, look, we had X many applications,
cool. Super
this many, this many went straight in the bin because they didn't actually just follow our criteria and what we wanted exactly to the T. And if you don't do that, often you do hit the bin. So just do exactly what they want, and this many people spelled our name wrong, and so on and so forth. And they give the feedback like that. And it's so valuable actually to see, the sorts of things they mention. They actually said they don't like people who share their mission statement back at them, which is why it kind of triggered.
Really?
When you mentioned, that's just their opinion, right? It's not a right or wrong,
But hence the importance of knowing who is going to read your CV.
yeah, exactly. But the important thing that they did say, which I think we all share, is like, they do your research on the organization. Why do you want this thing? Why do you want to work for us? Don't be generic. Again, like really be quite specific to them, because they want to know.
And do your research on the people too, if you can. Like for something like that, they might tell you, like if you're working with a scientist or the scientist's research, and maybe they don't know the name, but if you go to the website and you can kind of figure it out and put together the pieces, and even if it's something you've never studied before, you can talk about how you're so excited to learn about their behavior or whatever it is, and really show that you went above and beyond to look into the position.
Yeah, and that really helps at interviews, I think, as well, right? If you know who's going to be interviewing you, you've done your research, it helps you to settle in and get a little bit of rapport as well. It helps you to do small talk. It helps in so many different ways. Yeah, just to know the faces that are going to be in front of you. Yeah.
I'm going to email them and ask them why they don't like mission statements.
That's a good one.
Yeah. I'll send you a link afterwards. Yeah, it's all on there. Save the Rhino. Yeah. Well, guys, our hour's up. And time's flown again. So,
that was quick.
Yeah, I know. I could talk for hours, to you guys, but also about this sort of stuff. So luckily, hopefully we'll do this again.
We are addicted to applications.
Yeah.
I can say I don't get addicted to applications. That is something, I know what you mean by like the excitement and maybe you get addicted to like looking for jobs. I could see that because like, it's like, oh, this sounds so exciting and stuff. But the application process for me is very,
well, especially
not draining, but it's just
a different thing.
What?
Funding applications.
Yeah,
like
it's just
for research.
Yeah, it's just a big process in my opinion, but that's good. You get addicted to it.
It is hard work, but it's worth spending your time to do it well if you're serious about the job hunt. Yeah. All right. Well, we need to think about the topic of our next chat. I guess if people are listening here and want to share their thoughts and opinions, we'd love to hear them. Feel free to tweet us at Conserve Careers, or send us an email or whatever. You guys, if people want to kind of follow and find out more about you, where should we send them? Just as a reminder.
I am Bioblogo. Sorry. We have the delay in different countries. And then we step over each other. Bioblogo. You can find me on social media with that, and then that can lead you to the web pages.
Yeah, with me, if you just Google Fancy Scientist or fancyscientist.com, then you'll see all of my social media stuff too.
Fabulous. Well, thanks again for joining, guys. I've really enjoyed the chat once again. We'll reconnect again in a few weeks' time, and I look forward to whatever our next chat's going to be about. But until then, stay safe, stay well, and thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that, everyone. If you did, then please do hit the subscribe button to get notified of new episodes as they drop. And also please give us a rating or a review, because it really helps us to get in front of more people. Now, if you want our help to get clear and get started and get hired as a professional conservationist, I recommend you enroll in our free online training program, exploring how to get a conservation job. So if you're a student, a job seeker, or a career switcher, you'll learn the golden rule about how to get started, the key mistakes to avoid, and also we'll answer your biggest questions. You can check that out at conservation-careers.com/free. See you soon.